Hello, true crimerers. Just wanted to give you a really super quick intro. This is your second worst deaths imaginable compilation video. So, yeah, there you go. Viewer discretion is advised. This is Worst Deaths Imaginable number 6, and this is a redo. So the video I put up about Hisashi Ouchi had some misinformation in it. And the last thing I want to do is not provide the truth. That's my bad for not researching further. So here we go again. So Hisashi was one of 3 technicians working at the Tokaimura nuclear power plant in Japan. Now, these 3 technicians were in charge of looking after the process of dissolving and mixing enriched uranium oxide with nitric acid to produce uranyl nitrate, a process I couldn't even begin to understand. Now, they were under some time constraints, and because of that, and these are inexperienced technicians, the uranyl nitrate was not properly prepared, and they used shortcuts, something very ill-advised when talking about nuclear power. So, they ended up making a very catastrophic mistake. They ended up adding 7 times the recommended amount of a certain compound to the mixture, and this caused an uncontrollable, catastrophic chain reaction. And gamma radiation alarms started going off like crazy, and they knew they made a huge mistake, and it was too late. All 3 men were immediately exposed to deadly levels of SV or sieverts, basically radiation exposure. Now, anything over 10 SV is considered lethal. Hisashi got 17. One of the other technicians got 10, he would later die, and the third one only got 3. From what I understand, he did not die immediately from any of this, but down the road he did due to complications that stemmed from this incident. Now, in my original video, I said there's an image of him that's absolutely horrific. That image of a badly burned man is from a textbook, and it looked like it was from a horror movie, that's how bad it was. This is what Hisashi actually looked like. Thank you to one of my followers for getting me these correct images. I couldn't find them. He did have radiation burns across his entire body. His white blood cell count was at 0. Almost every internal organ had severe damage. He should have been dead. He got cancer treatment. He had to get skin grafts. He would actually lose a good portion of the skin on his body. He was in extreme agony, in extreme pain. This man suffered every single day. There was no hope to save him. He told the doctors, "I cannot take this anymore. I am suffering. I am not a guinea pig." Imagine all of your inner organs failing on you, all at the same time. He suffered 3 heart attacks, and the doctors resuscitated him every time, knowing full well there was basically nothing they can do to save his life. His family wanted the doctors to do as much as they could to save him, but not to the extent of making him suffer and torturing him, which ultimately is what happened to him. He suffered and was tortured for 83 days before his organs finally failed and he died. That's pain and suffering I hope no one ever has to feel. Worst deaths imaginable number 7, and this one involves 2 deaths. On October 29th, 2015, 4 mechanics were working on a wind turbine. And this was at Delta Wind's Piet de Wit, a wind farm in the Netherlands. The 4 mechanics were there just doing routine maintenance work, when suddenly, inside the chamber of the wind turbine they were on, a short circuit occurred and it created a fire. And this fire spread very, very quickly. Now, they're 260 plus feet in the air, and their means of escape, the way they got up there, was now engulfed in flames. A fire crew initially was able to get to the scene, but they did not have any way of getting up there quickly. They had to call in a crane to be able to reach up there. But for 2 of the men, a 19-year-old and a 21-year-old, it would be far too late. One of them literally became cornered by fire, and he had nowhere to go, no way of escape. He literally had no choice but to wait for the fire to reach him. He had the horrible, horrible luck of having to watch his inevitable death slowly approach him. And when the flames got to him, he would eventually burn to death, slowly and extremely painfully. The other man who was atop the wind turbine, he would be forced backwards by the flame and by the smoke, to a point where he lost his footing and he slipped and fell off the top of the wind turbine. He would fall approximately 262 feet to his death, and it's reported he died on impact. The other two men somehow, by miracle, were able to survive this fire when the fire crew finally got the crane there and were able to remove them off of the top. This incident started a chain reaction because initially no one was ever reporting wind turbine accidents. But when this happened and became so public so quickly, more and more turbine accidents were finally being reported. And to my knowledge, these were all investigated, but I don't know the results of those. But I can't even imagine being atop a 260-foot wind turbine on fire and knowing I'm about to either burn to death or possibly fall to my death. But I will die regardless. That thought process, I'm sure, went through their heads, and Jesus Christ. That is a hell I never wish to go through, and I would honestly never wish that upon my enemies. Rest in peace, fellas. Worst deaths imaginable, number 8, and yes, this is a redo. The original was taken down. So, for all future videos, I'm going to say this. This is a true crime page, so there will be sensitive content throughout. So, viewer discretion is advised. And this is a trigger warning for anyone who has a fear of heights. Let's go. This was 26-year-old Wu Yongning. He called himself China's first rooftopper. Rooftopping is when someone climbs onto a roof to a crane, unsecured with no safety gear. Basically anything super high. This action is considered illegal in most places, so of course, do not try any of it at home or away from home. Yongning was a viral superstar in China. He would post his videos on a Chinese social media place called Weibo, and these are incredibly daring climbs. Now, I don't have like the biggest fear of heights, but seeing the images of the stunts he performed, it's no. He literally like clings on to the sides of buildings, again with no safety wires. He climbs atop these giant like antennas and just is hanging on to it, and he has a selfie stick taking pictures. Now, one would think that he would have to assume the risk of this sort of endeavor, so he had to know that something like this could have been a possibility. He never had an unsuccessful rooftoping experience. You know, he would hang on to the sides of these buildings with, you know, just hundreds of feet of just air beneath him, where one wrong move, one wrong lift of the finger, one wrong step, gone forever. Wu got a lot of money for this. His fans donated, tons of money. He was planning to use that money to help take care of his sick mother and also pay for his future wedding, which he was about to propose to his girlfriend the day after this particular incident. Which, on November 8th, 2018, Wu Yongning would take an elevator up most of the Huaiyan International Center building, which was in Changsha in China. I'm sorry if I said all these names wrong. With the remaining 20 floors to go, he literally scaled the building, freeform. And his plan, which, again, do not try this, was to climb over the edge of the building, which he was seen wiping the edge of the building for like several minutes to make sure it was, dry and no dampness. And then from there, he would do pull-ups. Almost immediately when he scaled over, he lost his grip. He managed to get his hand back up on the edge of the building, but then he lost his grip again. And this time it was too late for him to grab the edge. He would fall roughly 50 feet to a cement landing beneath him, where he would die on impact. Time-wise, it would have been a very short fall, but I'm sure it felt like days, with fear consuming his entire body. To make matters worse, this was recorded, and it was seen by 15 million people in China. This is worst deaths imaginable, number 9. Let's hope it sticks. Viewer discretion is advised. This story involves a tragic death, and if you are claustrophobic, this video may possibly trigger you. Without further ado, this lovely woman was 56-year-old Clara Paulino. Her husband was a longtime Miami Police Department officer, 58-year-old Aristides Paulino. Officer Paulino had worked a night shift, so around 1 p.m. on August 21st, 2020, Aristides was asleep in bed. So Clara went out to his police SUV and went to the back seat to get something, but it seems to be unclear as to what she was actually trying to get. When she climbed into the back seat, somehow the door closed. I don't know if you've ever been in the back seat of a police vehicle, but because arrestees and prisoners are usually back there, they have mechanisms where you cannot get out of the door from the inside. So Clara was trapped, and it was a blistering 95 degrees outside. I was one time in the back of a police vehicle because I got into a car accident, and it was downpouring, so they put me back there just to keep me, from getting wet. And when he closed the door, I don't know if I've ever felt so much claustrophobia in my life. Because I knew that if I wanted to get out, I couldn't open the door and get out. I had to literally wait for the officer to open the door. So you could almost put yourself into her mindset when this was going on. She didn't have her cell phone. Her husband was asleep. The partition that separates the front of the car from the back, it's locked. It's caged. She could not reach through to honk the horn. So she sat in the back of this vehicle, struggling, trying desperately to get out. She was banging against the windows. And they could tell that because when they found her, she had a bunch of scratches on her hands. They also found her fingerprints everywhere. With the heat rising and her hyperventilating more than likely, she may have also been losing oxygen. She had to have been panicking, desperate to get out, but she couldn't. And a few hours later, around 5:30 p.m. that afternoon, her husband and her son found Clara dead in the back of the car. She had suffered a heat stroke. The likelihood is that this kind of death was very slow and quite possibly very agonizing. To be, like back there breathing in really heavy, panicking, freaking out, your body is overheating. It's almost literally like she was cooked to death. And that's a horror I can't even imagine, and I wouldn't wish on anyone. Just imagine being that helpless and likely knowing, I'm gonna die from this. It's horrifying. Rest in peace, Clara. Hello, true crimerers. It's time for Worst Deaths Imaginable, number 10. And this one is literally making me sick to my stomach. But with that being said, viewer discretion is advised. This was 28-year-old, and I'm going to say her name very wrong, and I apologize, Ekaterina Fedyaeva, and she lived in Ulanovska, Russia. She was diagnosed as having ovarian cysts, which typically end up being harmless, and most people don't need to have them, surgically removed. But some women do. And because she wanted to have children, her doctor thought removing the cysts would make it easier for pregnancy. On March 15th, 2018, she went in for her very routine operation. The operation portion went off without a hitch. But then a very catastrophic mistake was made. Earlier, when the story first came to light, multiple news sources would falsely report that she was supposed to be given a saline drip. But instead, the hospital somehow gave her a drip of formaldehyde. But given how the formaldehyde solution only comes in, big jugs or bottles, that would not have happened. What actually happened was that the medical staff used a form of formaldehyde called formalin, which is basically formaldehyde with water mixed through it, from what I understand. To those who don't know, formaldehyde is typically what, morticians will use to help preserve a body for like a funeral. But the staff used the formalin to irrigate her stomach. And so in a sense, Ekaterina was embalmed alive. They tried washing through her stomach, but it was too late. The chemical would slowly attack her body. And over the course of 14 hours, it would feel like her insides were on fire, as if they were actually burning. For 14 hours, her organs failed. At one point, she became conscious again and whispered to her mother, "Mom, I'm dying." And she was. Slowly, her organs failed one right after the other, which means she was in unbearable, excruciating, horrific pain. Feeling like actual fire is streaming through the inside of your body, knowing that you are literally in the process of dying, and there is nothing that anyone can do. She was eventually put on several machines to help keep her organs alive, but the doctors knew there was nothing they can do. They said it was impossible to save her. After 3 weeks of being hooked up to machines, while she was unconscious the entire time, she eventually would die. Over a mistake. I don't know what repercussions the hospital got though.